and hit that button. All right, so tonight we're looking at PFT 102's 12th chapter, which is the science of periodization. This is going to come under chapter 14 of your regular textbook. It's chapter 12 in the sports manual. It's chapter 14 of your regular. But what we're going to be looking at today, we want to be able to describe and define what acute variables are and sort of understand how they work and stuff. Describe which phases they're going to go into, and then obviously be able to write programs for each of them. So when we talk about program design, right, we are always talking about this idea of a purposeful system, which is why it's so funny. I just dropped it a minute ago. One of my roommates was asking me, it's so funny. He was just trying to make fun of me. And he's like, if you could only keep one thing, he's like, which would you choose? You can never play Ultimate Frisbee ever again, or you can never say the phrase form follows function ever again. And I was like, you evil man. Those are my two greatest loves on this planet. Is that phrase and playing Frisbee. But the reason I love that phrase so much, I think is kind of what led me to be a trainer, or maybe it's because I am a trainer. Either way, function following form there. But these are all the key aspects of writing an effective program, right? This is all sort of what comes together to make a purposeful program design. Like when you're just choosing a program for a client and you're writing something for someone, you want to make sure that you have a reason why you are picking every single thing that you're picking. So these are the ways that we're going to achieve certain physiologic outcomes. And all of it is very systematically organized. It's all designed to build up to a peak so that you can kind of reset that, like if you were to look at if this were like the stock market, right? It'd be like building, and then maybe it has a little bit of dip, and then it continues building like slowly over time. So the idea here is that by knowing these numbers and by using NASM's OPT model, you are taking out the guesswork, right? You don't have to actually think about all of these physiologic rules in order to apply them. You can simply follow. It's like, okay, well, my client wants to gain muscular size, so I'm going to stick in the hypertrophy range, and the hypertrophy range is anywhere from 6 to 12 repetitions, 75 to 85% intensity. As long as you follow all those rules, turns out you're going to be applying physiology pretty well. So that's sort of what the OPT model is. And if you ever see the definition of the OPT model, what they'll say is it's a planned, systematic model that is used for program design. And then obviously you are going to write out your workouts on OPT templates, which is this, this version of a workout sheet. I think that this is great. A lot of times I don't necessarily, I don't always use an OPT template. I use them constantly when we're teaching, when I'm teaching and stuff. But a lot of times what I'll send my clients and stuff will look really just something like this. And I'll organize it with maybe I'll build some movement prep stuff into this beginning, and then it'll just be much, much longer, and I'll build some resistance stuff down here, and I'll put a break in there and in the coaching tips, just because this is much simpler to read for my clients. They don't really need to know, what a movement prep or a speed, agility, quickness section is. But that's my official, off the record, take on it. That's how I do things personally. But obviously, when you're starting out, it's a really good idea to just use the OPT model. It's available for download on NASM's website. You can make your own at home if you have Microsoft Word. And it's just a very, very helpful system for writing out your workouts. So if you want to be a physiology expert and you want to apply things in ways that are going to give your clients the best results, you want to make sure that you are sort of following NASM's guidelines on what we call acute variables. And when I say acute variables, what do I mean by that, right? Well, these are the individual components of a workout program, right? So their job is to determine the amount of stress placed on the body, right? So the idea here is that your acute variables are what are setting you up. They are what's putting this specific type of stress on the body, right? So repetitions. When we talked about metabolic specificity, right? We were talking about that the other day. We know that high repetitions results in endurance, and we know that low repetitions results in maximum strength, right? Well, that's a metabolic specificity principle. Well, how do we apply that to the OPT model? Well, we're going to look and we're going to see the repetitions start relatively high, and then they're going to get lower and lower and lower as you climb up the more intense versions of the OPT model. So we do have all of our definitions here. I'm going to move through these pretty quick because I know you guys know these definitions, but repetitions, right? The big thing I do want you to know, the acute variables, again, determine the amount of stress placed on the body. That note right there is often the version of a question you'll see. But how do they come up with these numbers? Well, through trial and error and practice and understanding of mechanical, neuromuscular, and metabolic specificity, which are all based on the principles of understanding human physiology and human adaptation. So when I say repetitions, right, that is one complete movement of an exercise. So, and that's another thing that you kind of want to, this is just advice. This is not, this is just me imparting a little bit of advice to you guys. Your clients will sort of speak this language that sometimes gets confusing, and you want to keep this language, I think, clear in your head. When you call like a bench press is a movement, it's an exercise. It's not a workout. Sometimes you'll hear people say like, oh, which workout are we going to do next? And they'll be like, what exercise are we going to do next? Try really hard to keep those in your head separately. It's a movement, it's an exercise. That way, you're not getting confused about what sets are and what reps are. You are doing 4 sets of a particular movement for 15 repetitions each, right? That's if you speak that language that way and that very, very clearly, that's going to kind of make all of this easier. So repetitions are one complete movement of an exercise. You would do maybe 3 sets of 20 repetitions or whatever it happens to be, right? The whole purpose of repetitions is, their job is to provide a means by which you count your time under tension. Remember when I was talking about this, we talked about metabolic specificity, right? We were talking about targeting specific energy systems. We know that if you target an energy system for about 15 seconds, that's going to be your ATP-PC system. If you charge it from 15 to 30-ish seconds, that's going to be glycolysis. And if you're getting into 60 seconds or even definitely if longer, you're getting into your aerobic metabolism, right? So metabolism targeting, quote unquote, which is a term I just made up, is based entirely on your time under tension, the duration that you are performing an exercise for, not the number of reps, although obviously there is a correlation between number of reps and time under tension. But don't necessarily, here's what's weird about this. This is almost like a catch-22. I want you, reps are used to count time under tension, but I don't want you to necessarily think that, the ATP-PC system is only, or I'm sorry, the aerobic system, let's use that as an example. The aerobic system is only targeted when you do 20 reps. If your 20 reps were performed in 10 seconds, because you're doing them super fast, let's say you're doing punching or something, though that would, even though it's 20 repetitions, that would still very much be the ATP-PC system, because that is duration based, not repetition based. So I do want to keep that kind of clear there. But anyway, looking at repetitions, right? By definition, they're used to count our time under tension, and it's one complete movement of an exercise through its concentric to its eccentric to its isometric. Your sets are going to be a grouping of repetitions. So let's say you did 10 repetitions and you did it 4 times, right? Well, then you would be doing 4 sets of 10, which means you're doing a total of 40 repetitions, right? And so sets have, one thing that we need to remember is that sets and repetitions have what we call an inverse relationship, right? I know I'm never good at pulling up and kind of drawing charts on the go, but when we look at the idea of sets versus reps versus intensity, these all have a kind of an inverse relationship, right? So if your sets go down, well, then your reps should be high, right? But if your reps are high, if you're doing a lot of them, well, then obviously that means that your intensity is also going to go down. So these have kind of an inverse relationship to each other, right? These are all sort of working against each other, right? I guess actually what I'll do is let's see here, cut this, move this over here, and paste it back. Let's do that. If your reps are high, your sets and your intensity are going to be low. Obviously, you can't do the intensity of your 1 rep max for more than 1 rep. Otherwise, it's not your 1 rep max, right? So that's one thing we need. Well, you're also not going to like gain a bunch of muscle by going into the gym and being like, all right, let's do this. I'm going to do 100% of my 1 rep max. You get on there, you lift really heavy, and you're like, you do 1 rep, and then you rack it, and you're like, good session today, and then go home, right? Like that's not going to be enough stress to create change on the body either. So what we need to do, if your intensity is really high, and your reps are really low, you're going to need to do very, very, very many sets in order to see adaptation. There are even out there, the highest NASM's going to have you go is about 6 sets. You're not going to see NASM recommend any greater than that in terms of like set numbers. But there's programs out there that are like 10 sets of 1. Like that's a super intense program. Most of it's spent resting. What's ironic about that? You'll be like 1 and you rest for like 5 minutes. You do 1, but it's a very intense workout, and that's where we get into intensity here. So I do need you guys to think of intensity in the way a personal trainer thinks of intensity. We have our version of what intensity means. We need to get away from the idea that intense and hard are the same thing. They are not the same. Intense and hard are 2 totally different things. Like I think a marathon is hard, but it is incredibly unintense. Marathons are about as low intensity as you get next to walking, Intensity is the amount of effort compared with your maximal effort. So while a marathon is super difficult, you feel like soup when you're done with it. You feel like you're turning into liquid. And it's an incredibly tough event. It is certainly not intense because it's a lot of steps over a very long time. And we know that duration, and actually, you know what? I'll put that down here. We'll put that under reps as well. Duration, which is, kind of a fancy way of saying reps, right? Duration and intensity are inversely related. You cannot do high intensity for high duration. If you could, you would be a machine, and I mean that literally. But that also means you wouldn't be able to adapt to things because you would be a machine. You'd be built for 1 speed and you'd be stuck that way. So duration and intensity are backwards of each other, and it's a percentage of your maximal effort, right? So typically we represent this as like a percentage of your 1 rep max. Like if I can lift 100 pounds and I lift 85 pounds, I'm lifting 85% of my 1 rep max. That's an 85% intensity, which would be great, by the way. Like that's right around like the hypertrophy max strength range, And so it's determined by your sets and reps, and it has, like I said, an inverse relationship with repetitions there. Now, whenever you work really hard like that, guess what? You're going to need a lot of rest, right? And that's where a rest interval comes in terms of like how we choose things, right? So this is the time taken to recuperate between sets. This is going to determine the energy replenishment for your next set. If you do not take adequate rest, you are not going to replenish enough energy. And that could totally be your goal. That could be great if you're trying to develop endurance, right? Like I said, if you keep your rest interval really low, your body's going to go, holy crap, I need to learn how to recover faster. And so what it'll do is your body will make things like mitochondria and more hemoglobin and things like that, things that'll give you endurance. But if you give yourself plenty of time to rest, your body will then fully recover, and it will be able to leave everything on that bench every single time you do it, everything on that bar, everything on that, whatever. Which means that like when we are lifting at a high intensity, our rest interval is also going to be pretty high. but if we're working at like a high number of repetitions, chances are our rest interval is going to be pretty low because you're going to recover in that aerobic phase pretty quickly. You know, this is like, I think Charlie, you and I were talking about this, or I think I was asking about it the other day when we were talking about work to rest ratios. That's a concept that's applied to more to cardio than it is applied to strength training. But when you consider like a work to rest ratio, if you're taking lots of rest, that means you can work really hard. But if you're taking minimal rest, you're going to work at a medium intensity. So I'm going to do, man, I'm drawing 2 charts in one class. So that's rep, sets, and intensity. Those are backwards of each other. Let's go ahead and delete this here. And so when we think of like the idea of like replenishing your energy, right? And this is going to be kind of weird. Can I do like a curved line? Okay, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to draw it. So we think of like, high intensity. Like if we draw like a chart here, right? And we'll do this. We'll draw like a 2-sided chart here. And we'll label this bottom side. This will be the duration of exercise. And, this over here, this is going to be, intensity, right? And then let's see if I can, spin this real quick. I know there's a way to do it. Rotate 90 degrees. Oh, wait, rotate 180 degrees. There we go. All right, so we got our intensity here on this axis, right? And we got our duration of the exercise here. So if I take lots of rest, right? We'll say like lots of rest will be this red one here, right? Well, that means that like my intensity can be really high, and then because I'm resting so much, I can reset, which will allow me to recover fully so that I can work really hard again. And I can get back all the way up on that intensity. And then, I can kind of go back and forth like this. Whereas like if I take very little rest, like look at how, this is almost like an even distribution here, right? Although like that's actually not what it would look like. You know what? Let's redo that chart. Let's say like in a real workout, the intensity would look like this and be really high up here. And it'd be really short. And then I would take like a bunch of rest. And then I'd go right back up again. And my intensity would be really high. And then I'd take like a lot of rest. And then like my intensity would be really high. I'd take a lot of rest. This is harder than you think with a mouse. And then a lot of rest. I gotta get one of those like little pads with a pen so I can hand draw it. So that's kind of what it would look like, right? Like this would be like sprinting, recover, or this would be like lifting for maximum intensity. Maybe you're in the gym and you're doing like if you guys have ever heard, it's a very famous program, the Strong Lifts 5x5. That's where you would do 5 sets of 5 repetitions. So you're just like really heavy for 5, and then you rest like 3 to 5 minutes. It's a long time. Versus like a medium intensity program where my intensity is not going to go quite as high, and I'm probably going to take like a medium amount of rest here. And so it kind of ends up being this even distribution, right? This would very much be like a hypertrophy program. Like I'm almost taking an even distribution of rest versus work, right? It's like, I'm doing maybe 6 to 12 repetitions, and I'm taking about 60 seconds of rest, 1 minute. It's kind of your classic, a lot of programs that people have done, in general. That's most programs reflect this kind of blue line. That's pretty classic. Versus like an endurance program where the intensity is going to be pretty low, but you're really not going to take that much rest. And so what's going to happen is it's going to, not even that. It's going to kind of look just something like this. Really right in the middle there, right? I'm not really resting. I'm kind of just this little like not very big peaks line. This green line would represent like an endurance routine. The blue line would represent like a hypertrophy routine, and the red line would represent like a max strength routine. So we'll put that here. We'll say that this is endurance. We'll say the red one is hypertrophy. It's your gains with a Z. And then oops, I have that backwards, wrong color. There's your endurance routine, right? And then I would say the blue would be like hypertrophy. And then I would say like the red would be like max strength, right? All right, now that we drew a weird chart for the second time today, let's go ahead and get back into the PowerPoint. So that's the thing. Like what I really want you guys to kind of keep that in mind. These are probably the three most important, I'm sorry, the four most important acute variables. All of them are important. Don't make no mistake. But those are the four that are directly related to like physiology, right? Like physiologically, how do we target specific adaptations? You know, what are your goals, right? And this almost represents, you can almost see here, this chart represents our stabilization routine in green, our hypertrophy and, you know, our strength routine in blue. And did I draw an HS? No, that's an M. It's just really bad handwriting. Sorry. I was like, did I have a stroke? And then, you know, the red is representing like max strength or power adaptations, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at there in chart form right now. All of that's going to come together in this sort of overall concept. Now, this big concept is not one that you're going to write on a piece of paper. This is something that you, as the trainer, are kind of considering, you know, behind the page, and that is what we refer to as volume or training volume. You'll hear people say sometimes. Now, volume is the total amount of work performed in a given time period. So it is your sets times your reps over the course of a week. So let's say I do a program. Let's see, I'm just going to pull up a little notepad here. Let's say I'm going to do a program like this, right? I've got like Monday, and that's going to be like upper body, right? And I'll have like Tuesday, which is going to be lower body. And then Thursday, I'm going to go upper body again. And then Friday, back to lower body, right? So let's say that's my, you know, I'm doing a 4-day split here, right? And I'll do cardio on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So we'll put that up here. So we'll do cardio Wednesday, which would be like cardio, Saturday, cardio, Sunday, rest, right? So this is a pretty basic routine. It's pretty basic layout, right? But here's the thing, like I'm going to kind of break down my body parts. I've got my chest, I've got my shoulders, I've got my upper back, I've got my biceps, my triceps, and I've got my legs, which legs are kind of complicated because they kind of break down into a couple different pieces. You know, you get your glutes, quads, hamstrings, and if you want to throw calves in, you get calves, right? So, you know, those are sort of our different body parts that we're kind of looking at here. So in general, and this is something NASM doesn't ever explicitly say here. In fact, I think I did put, yeah, I got an opinion warning down here in the acute variables. So when it comes to training volume, there's been a lot of research done recently. If you guys want to learn a little bit about it, there's some really good videos out there on like training volume. Jeremy Ethier does a really good breakdown of a scientist who recently studied this. Same thing with Jeff Nippard. Both of those guys are really, really good. But if you look at like a lot of research has been done on the science of training volume and this is only in regards to hypertrophy and a little bit in regards to like max strength. And what they found is that the optimal training volume is anywhere from 10 to 20 sets per body part per week. Okay, so if we look at like optimal training volume, one of the, if I actually, I'm just gonna look that up. Yeah, you can see Jeff Nippard, he's got a really, really great video breakdown here. If you guys get a chance to watch this video, I really, really like it. He's got a really, and then here, Jeremy Ethier. These are my two kind of favorite guys on YouTube. They do simpler breakdowns if you don't want to read a lot of like the overall scientific studies that have been shown on these. These two guys do a really good breakdown in, you know, 5 to 10 minutes. And what I really, really like about them is that they cite the articles. If you do want to read the articles, they're in the description. You can read the links. But you can actually see it here. There's another, I think Jerry did like a call with the guy who did the study. His name is Brad Schoenfeld. He's an exercise physiologist. Him and another guy named James Krieger and another guy named Brett Contreras. They are sort of the three gurus in the world of weightlifting when it comes to training volume right now. They've done a lot of these big they did what's called a meta-analysis, which is basically where they didn't necessarily do an experiment of their own. What they did was they analyzed data from, if I remember, it was over 1,000 other studies. They analyzed all of the data and put it all together, and they saw like which experiments had resulted in like the most strength and muscle growth. And they found the magic number is somewhere between 10 to 20 sets per body part per week. So if we look at a program like this, upper, lower, right? What you can do is if you were to say like upper body day, you would have like a chest exercise, a shoulder exercise, and a back exercise, right? And if you want to have biceps and triceps, you can, but I'm going to go ahead and leave that off here for now. So if you did, let's say 3 sets, let's do the classic 3 sets of 12 reps, right? That's super popular in a lot of like magazines and other stuff. It's kind of like the old school go-to on the internet program. So if you did like 3 sets by 12 reps, right? For each of these. And, that program is going to be the same when it comes around on Thursday again. So we can literally just kind of copy this here, right? And we can put the same thing down here. So that means that your chest got 3 sets and then 6 sets towards the end of the week. So that's good, but it hasn't been shown to be quite as optimal or beneficial when compared with the 10 to 20 set range. So if you just modify this a little bit and you go, this is chest A, shoulder A, and upper back A, and then you just did the exact same thing again, and now you got a chest, B, shoulder B, upper back B, and then, you copy that and you do the same workout again, like I said, on Thursday. Well, now you're hitting 3, 6, 9, 12 sets for your chest, 12 sets for your shoulders, and 12 sets for your upper back. And you're doing 6 exercises in one workout. So maybe it's the bench press, then you go do like a military barbell press, and then you do some weighted pull-ups. And then you go, back over to the chest area and you do an incline chest press. And you do a dumbbell lateral raise. And you do a bent over row. Well, that's your upper body workout on Monday and Thursday. You're hitting 3 sets, 60 seconds each. You could easily get through this workout in probably 35, 40 minutes. If you're really being diligent, not goofing around between sets and things like that. And guess what? You're hitting 12 sets per body part per week, right? 12 for your chest, 12 for your shoulders, 12 for your upper back. That's a pretty good amount to see optimal growth. And it had nothing to do with reps. I picked 3 by 12 here, but the reps don't have to be part of the conversation. It's really sets that we're looking at here. So that's your total training volume. Now, here's what I say, like where reps do become part of the conversation. Let's say this was 3 sets of 20, right? Well, that is, 30, 20, 40, 60 repetitions every set. So you're doing 120 reps per body part per workout. That's a large amount of training volume, and that could lead to overtraining. That could be way too much stress, just because it's way too many repetitions and too many sets altogether. So there is, don't get me wrong, sets or repetitions are part of the conversation. But when it comes to training volume, like I said, there's an inverse relationship with your intensity. If you were doing 20 repetitions, luckily your intensity is going to have to be pretty low. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to get through all 20 repetitions. So maybe you're protected. Maybe that 3 sets, 60 reps every freaking time, twice, 120 reps per workout, 240 reps over the course of a week. Maybe that's actually not that bad because all those reps were really unintense, But where we start to get into trouble is where we have high training volume and high intensity and limited rest. And, like all of that comes together. It's like, that's where you are running into like overuse city population, you and your clients, So does that make sense, guys, when it comes to training volume? Does anyone have any questions on training volume or anything like that?
I got a quick question really quick.
Yeah, please.
For that, how you were doing the upper and lower body,
Mm-hmm.
every other day. Yeah. So for chest A, would that target like a certain part of your chest, and then chest B would target a different part, or just as long as you're overall on the same?
Yeah, that's a good question. And this is where like we do get into a little bit of like, it's almost like a topic of debate in a way. For the most part, like if you go to your kinesiology, remember we talked about your chest. Your chest is your pectoralis major for the most part. Yeah, your pec minor's there and it's involved, and it's gonna always do work. But your pecs don't really do a lot of different things. Don't get me wrong. Like I did say this. I was like, look, there are lower fibers that kind of do a little bit more of like shoulder extension, and there are upper fibers which kind of do a little bit more of like shoulder flexion. But I wouldn't break your chest down that way, because at the end of the day, all of the fibers every time are always doing horizontal adduction, no matter what. So even if you've got like your upper fibers that are kind of assisting with some like flexion, or your lower fibers, which are kind of assisting with some extension, no matter what, like your chest is getting work there. So and this is me personally, I don't put a lot of emphasis on targeting parts of my chest. Now, if I got a client who's like really complaining about like having a hard time closing that gap or something, sure. Like what I'll do is I'll focus a little more on like flying movements and things like that. But for the most part, like your chest is your chest. You don't need to hit lower chest 10 to 20 times, and upper chest 10 to 20 times, and middle chest 10 to 20 times. The only small exception to that I have, and this is, again, a very personal opinion, the only tiny exception I have to that is the difference between rowing and pulling. I do think that like this part of your chest that does this acts a little bit differently than the part of your chest that does this. So I always try to have a combination of both of those types of pulls in my routines. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to do 10 to 20 sets for, vertical pulling and 10 to 20 sets for horizontal pulling. I still don't break it down that way, because both are working in both of those directions. It's just my lats are definitely a prime mover in this direction, and my rhomboids and mid traps are definitely the prime mover in this direction. But both of those other muscles are there to help with those pulls as well. Does that make sense, Robert?
Yeah, I guess the chest was like a bad example, but as far as maybe like on leg day, you have your quads and you have your hamstrings.
Yeah, your quads and hamstrings. Yeah, that's where we get into a little bit of, it's like, because it's like, well, it's just all legs, right? And it's like, yeah, your hamstrings though are not synergistic to your quads, and then your hamstrings are also not that I mean, don't get me wrong. Again, your hamstrings are synergistic with your glutes, but they are not targeted very well during squatting movements. At least they shouldn't be. Squatting movements work really, really well on your quads and your glutes. They tend to leave your hamstrings uninvolved. So I will usually do 10 to 20 sets for like glute and quad together, and I'll try to get like a little bit of like an additional few for my like hamstrings, and if I want to do calves, I'll throw some calf stuff in there as well. But yeah, there is some other research that has indicated that like a lot of times people's hamstrings have a really hard time keeping up when people only focus on squatting and deadlifting movements, and they don't give the hamstrings just a little bit of like special love. um, they're almost they have a hard time like keeping up with everything else. But that is almost, I mean, it should definitely be part of this conversation. But that is again personal thing. NASM doesn't take a hard stance on that, so you're never gonna get asked about that. Some other people don't take a hard stance on that, but yeah, I think your hamstrings need a little bit extra love. But they're really the only example that I can really think of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that's why when you were splitting the workouts from A to B, I was, thinking, well, maybe it's to target a specific area of muscles, whether it be in the quads, whether it be in the hamstrings for leg day.
Yeah, I mean, your quads are always going to look, if you're doing like a lunge, you're getting glutes and quads. And yeah, your hamstrings are there. They're doing a little bit of work, but I would not consider that a hamstring exercise. So, that's where it does get a little bit more complicated. But yeah, usually you got to do like, I call them makeup sets. Whenever I see something kind of lagging behind and I throw something else in there, you almost got to do some makeup sets for the hammies.
Yeah, I guess there's a certain extremities of your body that you can be like that with, right? Where you target like the lower half or the upper half, maybe on the shoulder area too.
Oh yeah, I mean sure. I mean, um, look at the difference between like anterior, medial, and posterior delt. Uh, your posterior delt tends to lag behind a little bit. Rotator cuff tends to lag behind a little bit. I will say what's nice about all this is like with your movement prep section, a lot of times NASM is doing a good job helping you catch those things up because they'll often be like activated. Even though I don't consider the movement prep section part of your training volume because it's not at a very high intensity. It's the movement prep is designed to turn your muscles on so that you can work out the way you're supposed to work out, right? You're able to use the right agonists and the right synergists. Movement prep is not part of the effort based, I guess. It's not part of intensity. That's why intensity hasn't been a part of the conversation until we got to here. So that can be also used to kind of fill in your gaps. That's where I put arm work a lot of times. You know how I give you, I give you guys the example of like single leg lift and chop and single leg balance and reach and stuff like that all the time. Honestly, the number one single leg exercise that I often do with my actual clients is either single leg bicep curl, single leg shoulder press, or single leg tricep cable tricep press down. And it's because I don't want those exercises taking up time in like the meaty part of my workout. I don't want to waste time on arms, but I do want to waste time on balance because balance is really important to me. But my client doesn't give a crap about it. But they do love arm work, and I don't give a crap about arm work. So like it's like my way of like giving my client what they want while getting what I want, which is like strengthening their feet, core, and like overall balance capability, you know? But again, that's a personal touch as well. This is where like, there's no textbook on like what your personal opinions are going to be as a trainer, we're just kind of trying to break down the sort of physiology. Physiology is only going to work one way, but how people interpret it and how it relates to our goals, I think that that's going to be specific to, you, me, Nicholas, Irene, Charlie, all of us, we're all going to have different opinions on that stuff. That's great. That's a good thing, all right, so let's look at one other one here. And actually, oh yeah, it's not in this. Oh, I remember this. I remember this not being in the PowerPoint and that driving me crazy. Frequency is another one here. Frequency, like I said, volume. By the way, volume is about over the course of like a week. That's how they analyze the data in that study that I mentioned. That's how most people analyze the data because we're organizing it in such a way that our brains understand it. We've created a world where we understand things in weeks. But there is training frequency here, and frequency is where there's kind of two parts to this. There is the frequency within like a week, and then there's the frequency within like a month. And it's the number of training sessions in a given time period. Typically, we're talking 9 out of 10 times, 9.5 out of 10 times, we're talking about within a week. And like I said, I put an opinion warning up here. A lot of experts agree that the optimal training frequency for muscle growth and muscle strength is hitting a muscle 2 times per week. So I know that there is the classic like bro split. Let me see here, bro split. I know there's the classic bro split, which looks just like this. Chest day, back day, shoulder day, leg day, arm day, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Chest day, back day, leg day, arm day. You know, like shoulder day. That's a classic breakdown. This got really popular. This is what a lot of like Arnold used to do, and things like that. And we call it the bro split because, you know, it's very popular in the world of bodybuilding. And I don't have anything against it if it's used the right way. I think revisiting the bro split a couple times, once a year or so, can be really effective. But here's my problem with it. You'll notice if you hit your chest, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Scrolling down. Am I not in the actual picture all by itself? Why can't I scroll? Is the picture cut off? Is that the whole picture? Okay, well, you can't, obviously, there's rest down here at the bottom. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Sunday's missing. What the fuck? Zoom out? Oh, yeah. Obviously, Sunday's there. You're hitting like, it's going to be like a full week before you get back to your chest. And if our goal is to experience as much strength gains and as much muscle gain as possible in a short period of time, well, then we want to make sure that we are, you know, training with an optimal frequency, right? And a lot of experts agree that that optimal frequency is actually at least 2 times per week. And then there's some tapering off, you know, because people are like, well, obviously frequency is really good. If we saw a growth from 1 time a week to 2 times per week, wouldn't it make sense to do 3 times per week? But what kind of happens is it's like we see way more growth from 1 time to 2 times, and then it kind of caps off. We don't really see, it's not necessarily better to train 3 times per week. And then training more than that for those body parts almost might become detrimental at some point, where now you're not giving your body enough time to prepare. So in my opinion, my favorite is hitting things 2 times per week, sometimes 3 times per week. Like I said, this month, what I'm doing is I am doing a total body routine 3 times per week. I've got like Monday, which is total body A, and then Wednesday, which is total body B, and Friday, which is total body C. And I literally, in each of these, I have 1 chest exercise, 1 back, 1 shoulders, 1 biceps, triceps, quads, and glutes, and hamstrings. And that is a classic routine. Now, I will say, you'll notice that I put them as A, B, and C. That indicates that I do have a different chest exercise on Monday versus Wednesday versus Friday, and the same is true for all the other movements. So, you know, like I'm doing like a bench press on Monday, an incline chest press on Wednesday, and a chest fly on Friday. And those are 3 just slightly different, you know, variations. Just like I'm doing a dumbbell shoulder press, a dumbbell lateral raise, and a military press. Similar movements, just ever so slightly different every time. And that little difference, you know, hopefully is making, you know, a positive impact, right? And like I said, I got a little, you can see I've got actually the hamstrings by themselves here as well. And that's going to be 4 sets for everything. 8 reps for everything. So that's 4 by 8 on each of these, which means that that's a total of 4, 8, 12 sets, right between 10 and 20, you know? If I were going for hypertrophy, I'd probably aim for 20 sets. I'd probably, change up that routine a little bit, but that's not really my goal this month. So that's your training frequency. So and then in general training frequency, like that's talking about body part stuff. But just talking about like overall training frequency of what NASM recommends for being like a general active person. So not so much body parts, but just working out, right? NASM is going to recommend 3 to 5 days per week to see improvements, 1 to 2 days per week to have maintenance. And that's going to correspond with the USDA, or I'm sorry, the FDA, right? 3 to 5 days per week, about 150 minutes per week of activity versus 75 minutes of high intensity activity. So another one that we got to talk about is duration. I skipped past duration, but duration is the time frame from start to finish of a single workout session, or it's the number of time that you spend. This is a definition that I freaking hate in your textbook. I think it's so stupid that they didn't label it some other way. They could have literally called it session duration versus like weekly duration or something. But I apologize. This is a definition that literally has 2 meanings. One of them is how long your session is. One of them is how long you are in a specific phase of training. So if you're in stabilization for 4 weeks, that's duration. If your workout is 60 minutes, that's also duration. They are nothing alike, but they are identically labeled, and it's dumb. By the way, exclude your warm up and your cool down. And the other thing, general time frame. Your workouts should be about 60 up to 90 minutes. Do not take your workouts any longer than that. If you're going up over 90 minutes, you are going to be tapping into your muscle glycogen, and chances are you are going to atrophy because you're going to create way too much cellular damage. Not to mention the fact that like all the stuff that you worked at the beginning of your workout has been resting this entire time, and you are not giving it nutrients to repair, which means you're missing that sort of optimal eating window that we get after we work out. So I'm not a big fan of super, super long workouts. You see those people in the gym who are in there for 2 hours at a time, and that's definitely not something we're really looking for. If you are going to do that, let's say you're training an athlete or something, you should definitely be getting some carbohydrates with a little bit of protein in the middle of your workout. So, a protein shake with lots of carbs in it, a Gatorade with maybe a little bit of protein on the side, something like that. And then we got exercise selection, which is actually the acute variable that we spend most of our time talking about until today. But those are the exercises you're choosing, right? So are you choosing stabilization exercises, strength exercises, or power exercises? That's going to depend on your client's goals and what phase of training they're in. But there's also like, are you doing a total body exercise? Are you doing a multi-joint exercise, a single joint exercise? In the stabilization and strength levels, we can do total body, multi-joint, or single joint movements. The only thing is that in the power level, we do not do single joint exercises. There are no such thing, and you'll notice it in your books when you look at your exercise lists. You will notice that like the stabilization level and the strength level have bicep and tricep exercises, but the power level doesn't. There are no arm power exercises. Not that you can't develop power in your arms through like punching and things like that, but there's no bicep or tricep power exercises simply because those are single joint movements, and it just doesn't make any sense to like, do something super explosive and weird. Like it just isn't going to develop strength the way it needs to. So it's either going to be a total body exercise, like a deadlift to bent over row with calf raise, or a walking lunge with lateral raise, or a step up curl to shoulder press. Those are all total body exercises. Or it's going to be a multi-joint exercise where, the bench press is shoulder, elbow, and wrist, all 3 of those happening simultaneously. Or a squat is hip, knee, and ankle. That's a multi-joint exercise. So all of that comes together and makes up this concept that we are going to refer to as periodization, meaning that you are applying specific periods of specific types of training to certain times of the year, right? So periodization is a concept of dividing your training program into distinct phases. So again, it's very systematic. We want to make sure that we are being smart about this and that we're designing it specifically. And we got to remember that principle that we talked about on Friday, general adaptation syndrome. We know that the body, experiences alarm reactions, then it develops resistance to something before finally experiencing exhaustion if we overdo it. So we don't want to stay in one phase of training too long because we might end up in that exhaustion phase. So that's where we have these sort of three different ways that we're going to break things up. We're going to break it down by year, we're going to break it down by month, and we're going to break it down by week. And so when you look at that, we have the need for like long-term planning, like a full year, and short-term planning, which is like either a month or a week, right? So a macro cycle, which is often simply referred to as your annual plan. This is the overall plan for an individual over the course of an entire year. By the way, you can see here I gave an example of that, but I only broke it down for 6 months just to keep it on the page. So a macro cycle is your annual plan. You are going to go through several distinct phases every year, right? A mesocycle is a month of training, right? So it's like, are you going to be like in, this specific phase of training like this month, and how are you going to break that down? And then a microcycle is a weekly plan for like what your week is going to look like. Are you doing workout A, workout B, workout C, A, B, C, D, A, B, A, B, A, B? Are you doing A, B, C, D, E? Like what does your week look like? And so that's what we're talking about there when we talk about like periodization. Like how do these phases, relate to the specific adaptations that we're doing? How long do I have to return to stabilization to make sure that everything's okay? How can I grow in like those later phases, right? That's where we kind of take in the OPT model here, right? Phases 1 through 5. I know we see 6 here. It's the sports book. It's all your sports specific, super maximal power stuff, right? So I'm going to go into this in just a second, but I want to finish up the PowerPoint real quick. So stabilization level. And by the way, you can see here, they didn't actually put it on here, but they have phase 1. Technically, there used to be a phase below phase 1, which is what you see here. That's corrective exercise. So this is what you're going to use if you got to fix any muscle imbalances. This is sort of like prior to entering the OPT model proper, right? This is phase 0.5 is what I like to call it. Then you have the stabilization endurance phase, right? We talked about how like the whole goal of adaptations there are for us to increase our proprioception, our neuromuscular efficiency, and things like that. Then you would move into the strength endurance phase, which is phase 2. Now that is part of the strength level, which means you're going to choose strength exercises, but we're still very much focused on endurance here, right? So I honestly kind of like to think of phase 2 as phase like 1.5, because you're kind of getting the strength work in there, but you're also doing like a lot of stabilization work still. And we're going to use those superset techniques in strength endurance, which is a great way for us to develop, like I said, like overall endurance, right? Then we got the hypertrophy phase, right? Hypertrophy is all about like maximal muscular gain, right? That's cellular adaptations is what you'll hear NASM say a lot. The idea is that you are growing tissue, maximum strength, which is all about neurologic adaptation to gaining strength. You are developing more motor units. You are going to develop some muscle, but primarily you're teaching your nervous system how to control that muscle, right? And that is the true strength part of the strength phase, right? I'm sorry, that's the true strength part of the strength level. Maximum strength is really, all about just getting something from point A to point B. Then we get power. Power is all about like developing, the ability, like rate of force production. Like if strength was all about force production, power is all about rate of force production. We're trying to turn that over as fast as possible. And then maximum power is all about, your sports specific, excuse me, absolute maximum intensity, working as hard as you can. This is where you're going to try to peak right before your season starts. And then you're just going to try to coast on that strength that you've developed all season. So now there are a couple different ways that we can lay out periodization. So I want to show you an example of a macro, meso, and micro cycle with what is called linear periodization. Now, this is a question that's not in this PowerPoint here, but I think it's in your homework but it's definitely in your regular textbook. But there are two types of periodization. There is linear periodization, right? This is the periodization that is performed in one phase of training over an extended period of time, which is usually like 1 month, right? So for instance, if your client is in stabilization for 4 to 6 weeks and then moves on to a different phase. So this is linear, right? I'm basically drawing a straight line, stabilization, 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 all 4 weeks. So in January, I'm in stabilization. In February, I'm in strength endurance. I'm going to go ahead and skip hypertrophy and max strength. And in March, I'm going right into power. And then I would repeat, right? So this is an athlete who carries, about stabilization, endurance, and power. This is probably not a very heavy lifting athlete. This is a very explosive sort of probably cardio-based athlete. This is probably a basketball player or maybe a soccer player, ultimate frisbee player, something like that. So what my month would look like is I would have workout A here on Monday, workout B on Wednesday, and workout A again on Friday. And then next week I would just flip that. So I'm kind of going just back and forth between A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B. And every one of those workouts, you can see my microcycles here. Workout A is a stabilization workout. Workout B is also a stabilization workout. So stabilization A, stabilization B. And then you'll notice because I am in stabilization, I'm just doing stage 1 cardio. That's 65 to 75% of my heart rate max all 3 days, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So this is very much a very, very, very cardio-based routine. This would work exceptionally well for a client who is going for a weight loss routine. This would be an excellent weight loss program, right? Now, athletes who are mid-season, I want them to have stabilization because I don't want them to get overuse injuries, but I also still want them to be relatively strong, but I also still want them to have lots of power. I don't want my athlete to lose any of that athleticism at any point during the season. So what often works really well with athletes is a different concept called undulating periodization. And I put it half and half here on this macro cycle. But you can see we've got linear periodization here, where it's like they're in January, they're in February, they're in March, 1, 2, 5. But then you can see I've got 3 things marked for each month here. So it's like they're doing phases 1, 2, and 5 in April, May, and June. And that means that chances are this is when my athlete's season starts. This is probably right at the end of the preseason. And then they're going right into the overall season for their sport. I don't want them to lose that stabilization, that strength, or that power. So I'm hitting a little bit of it every single time. So you'll notice we're looking at our mesocycle here. This is an undulating routine. So you'll notice that I've got this labeled as April. So this is our first month here. So they've got workout A, which actually which is, you take a look down here at our microcycle. Workout A is a stabilization routine. So they're always going to do stabilization on Monday. And then workout B is where they're always going to do strength endurance. And workout C is where they're always going to do power. And then they've got a light cardio day, a medium intensity cardio day, and a high intensity cardio day, and then they rest and recover. So that would be an undulating routine. So that's using multiple phases of the OPT in 1 week's time, rather than using one phase of the OPT. Another version of linear periodization that would look just a little bit different would maybe be doing something like this. I'm going to go back up here to this linear version, and we're going to modify it. Let's say that's A. We'll call that B. We'll call this C. And we'll call this A. So this is another version of linear periodization, right? So linear periodization is, again, staying straight. So I'd be in stabilization. My workout A is a stabilization routine for week 1, strength endurance for week 2, power for week 3, and then I would kind of reset at the end with strength endurance. That works pretty well as well. I don't have anything against this. I don't typically tend to do this because I find that people have a hard time learning the movements properly when you do that version. So I'm not as huge a fan of the 1 week at a time thing, but I don't hate it. In fact, beginning of the year, I kind of got my January workout plan. I'm going to be doing, high reps for my first week, medium reps for my second week, low reps for my third week, and then I'll end it with high reps for that final week in January there. So that's my New Year's routine, I guess you could call it. And I'm doing, that version there, but it's very linear across the week versus undulating, which is moving through different phases over the course of the entire week. So that is sort of how we lay things out in a year versus a month versus a week. Do you guys have any questions about that? You guys feeling good about like understanding the periodization aspects of it? Okay, so go ahead and close all this. All right, we have got to dive into our overall big chart. So, guys, I know most of you guys know this, but Charlie, when you look in your textbook, you will see in chapter 14, you're going to see on page, what is it? 379, I want to say. You'll find a chart that looks like this. It'll be blue, but it'll look exactly like this. These are all of the rules for all of program design for the stabilization routine. So when it comes to flexibility, you're choosing SMR and static. Core, you're choosing core stabilization exercises, 12 to 20 reps, 1 to 4 sets. This is all the stuff that we've been building in our example routines. These are all the rules that I've been following in all the examples that we put up until now. But that's only so helpful. You guys have got to see all of it in one page. So this is our big chart. My recommendation, Charlie, is that you make your own big chart. It will be available for download tonight on Canvas. I'm going to attach it to tonight's email, but I really recommend you making your own like pen and paper big chart and then flashcards that go along with that big chart because it is just so very helpful. Where is it? There it is. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and start with flexibility. We're going to work our way down. And we're going to go through all 5 phases here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the warm-up section first, right? So warm-up is going to consist of flexibility and cardio, right? That's what we put in the warm-up section, right? We put any stretches that they're doing related to flexibility. And if we are going to put some cardio, we're going to put it in there, right? Then we got our movement prep section. That's going to be your core exercises, your balance exercises, your plyometrics. SAQ is by itself. And then resistance training, like I said, sort of the meat and potatoes of any, exercise routine. So looking at the flexibility section, right? And this blue is stabilization, the green is strength, and yellow is power. So corrective flexibility is going to consist of, and we already talked about this, but it's going to consist of SMR and static stretches, right? And what you're going to do is you're going to choose 1 to 3 sets of whatever exercise it is you're doing, and you're going to hold each rep for 30 seconds, right? So those are all the rules for any client in the stabilization phase. Now you'll notice if we move to the strength level, it's the strength level, by the way, not strength phase. If we move to the strength level, you'll notice this is broken down into the strength endurance phase, the hypertrophy phase, and the max strength phase. There is no such thing as strength endurance stretching. Oh my God, ow. There's no such thing as hypertrophy stretching, and there's no such thing as max strength stretching. There is just strength. Just like there's no, there are core strength exercises, but there's no core hypertrophy, core strength endurance. Exercise selection is entirely based on the level, and the level that we are in is the strength level. Okay, so whether it's a strength endurance client, a hypertrophy client, or a max strength client, it doesn't matter. You are going to be performing active flexibility. And when I say active flexibility, what I mean is self-myofascial release and active isolated stretches. So rather than holding those stretches for 30 seconds each, you are going to do 1 to 2 sets of 5 to 10 reps, and you're going to hold each of those reps. The reps should last, 1 to 2 seconds. And that way you're going to be applying that reciprocal inhibition rather than the autogenic inhibition, right? So that's the difference between corrective and active. That's where you use it in stabilization versus strength. Then if our client is in the power level, we are going to be performing functional flexibility, right? That's going to consist of self-myofascial release and dynamic stretches this time. And you're going to pick 3 to 10 dynamic stretches. You're going to do 1 to 2 sets of those, and you're going to do each set for maybe 10 to 15 repetitions. And that's our functional flexibility. So really not applying autogenic or reciprocal inhibition here. Instead, what we're doing is we're kind of putting a little bit of stress on those muscles to get them activated and turned on before we start exercising. We might even be applying a little bit of a stretch shortening cycle to really get that stretch reflex turned on strong in our muscles and get them like, all right, man, I'm ready to go, like really, really, really turned on. So those are our overall acute variables for flexibility. Now, cardio-wise, right, any client who's in stabilization, that's going to correspond for the most part with stage 1 cardio. Any client who's in strength, they're going to get stage 2 cardio. And any client who's in power is going to get stage 3 cardio. And when I say stage 1 cardio, well, that cardio is going to consist of zone 1, which is about 65 up to 75% of your heart rate max. Stage 2 cardio consists of zones 2 and zone 1 to recover. So we work in zone 2, we recover in zone 1. Zone 2 is 76 to 85% of your heart rate max. Zone 1 is 65 to 75%. And lastly, we've got clients who are in stage 3. They are going to get zones 1, 2, and 3. Zone 3 is going to be 86 to 95%. Zone 2 is still 76 to 85, and zone 1 is still 65 to 75. So we might be working between all 3 of those zones, taking our heart rate really high, recovering. This is like interval training. This is high intensity interval training. That's HIIT training, which is so popular nowadays. Any questions on the warm-up section? Charlie, how you feeling?
Oh, I'm good, Brett. I'm just trying to, keep up with.
Now, let me know if I'm moving too fast.
No, you're good. You're good.
Because sometimes I blast through this stuff. But like I said, it's super helpful. Man, you guys didn't get it. Irene, you're the only one in here, and I'm about to lose you to Mo at the beginning of the year. You're the only one in here. In in-person Sochi, I had a huge whiteboard in my classroom, and we would make a big ass chart every mod, and like we'd have it all laid out, and I would use every ounce of this giant whiteboard, and everybody in class would be making their chart with them, and like people will be like, I have mine from the last time, but it's so helpful to write it, to really write it. So I really do recommend it, guys, if you get a chance. Do it on pen and paper. Okay, movement preparation, right? Core, balance, reactive. So I'm going to do this one kind of all together. But while we're looking at the stabilization level, right, we are going to choose core stabilization exercises. balanced stabilization exercises, plyometric stabilization exercises. Yeah, the big ass chart. So those are our three main levels there. Our three types of exercise selection there. Now there is something that NASM does here that drives me absolutely crazy. I mean, I get it. All this stuff is based on physiology, but the part of my brain that loves symmetry hates this thing. You will notice the core exercises are 1 to 4 sets, and then balance and plyometric are both 1 to 3 sets, which is infuriating to me. I cannot even think of the last time I did 4 sets on a core exercise because I hate not having symmetry. But for the core, 1 to 4 sets, 12 to 20 repetitions. Now I will say a lot of times core exercises in the stabilization phase tend to be isometrics. So really that's, in my opinion, anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds. That's how I like to think of it personally. But you know, there are obviously, you can do a plank and then rest and plank and then rest. Those stop-go planks actually have been shown to get really good at core activation. A lot of people just do your plank, you know, you hold it for a full 60 seconds, but there's actually some good evidence to suggest that like taking a little pause in between is a really effective way to get everything turned on. Excuse me. Core stabilization exercises, right? They focus on not moving your spine. And then 0 to 90 seconds of rest. For your balance stabilization, those are exercises that are not moving your balance leg, right? 1 to 3 sets, 12 to 20 repetitions if it's a double-sided exercise, which it never is because it's a balance exercise, which inherently means standing on one leg. So that's going to be 6 to 10 reps if it's single-sided. So it's 12 to 20 total, but like, you know, let's say you're doing like a single leg lift and chop, that'd be like 6 on the left, 6 on the right. Slow tempo, 4-2-1, and then 0 to 90 seconds of rest. Then finally, we've got plyometric stabilization exercises. These are going to be 1 to 3 sets. Your reps are pretty low here. Remember, our goal is not to do like a lot of jumping with stabilization clients. Our goal is to focus on landing mechanics. So you're going to only do 5 to 8 repetitions there. And you're going to hold your landing for 3 to 5 seconds because, again, no movement of the core, no movement of the balance leg, no movement upon landing. You know, this is not about getting right into your next big jump. It's about holding that perfect landing for 3 to 5 seconds so that your brain has time to memorize it. And then again, 0 to 90 seconds of rest. So that's our stabilization side of things. Now, if we raise that intensity a little bit, we go into the strength version, you know, we just talked all about like resisting movement. Now let's talk about, you know, creating lots of movement. So we got our core strength exercises, moving the core through a full range of motion. We got balance strength exercises, moving the balance leg through a full range of motion. Plyometric strength exercises, moving through a full range of motion with those plyometrics at a repeating tempo. Right? So that's going to be 2 to 3 sets for all of them. That's nice and symmetrical, which I love. And then they screw it up on the next part. 8 to 12 reps for your core strength, 8 to 12 reps for your balance strength. That's going to be, by the way, each leg because it doesn't indicate otherwise. And then 8 to 10 reps for the power. They just had to ruin it. You know, it's a perfect pattern there, and then they take 2 reps off. But again, it's all about like, you know, making sure that we're not going too high on the intensity here. We're still early on the OPT model. And remember this again, there are no hypertrophy core exercises. There are no max strength core exercises. All 3 of these apply whether your client is in strength endurance, hypertrophy, or max strength. You know, your movement prep can literally be identical. This is going to be at a median tempo for the core strength. So that's about 2-0-2. So like 1-2-1-2. Medium tempo for your balance strength. Same concept. And then plyometric strength is all about that repeating tempo. Get into your rep, get out of your rep. Get into your rep, get out of your rep. You know. And then 0 to 60 seconds rest for all of them, which is classic strength. And then lastly, we've got our power movement prep here. Core power, balance power, reactive power, plyometric power, right? 2 to 3 sets, 8 to 12 reps for all of them. nice and symmetrical, nice and patterned. And then we're going to do an explosive tempo for your core power exercise. That means that not only is it explosive when you're throwing it, it's explosive when you're catching it. So let's say like one of our core power exercises that is a really good oblique exercise is the medicine ball rotation chest pass. So the medicine ball rotation chest pass looks like this. Got a medicine ball in my hand. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate and throw that medicine ball like this. That's giving me a little bit of oblique work. Then what's going to happen is I'm going to take that ball and receive it and then send it back. And a lot of times you'll see people do this. They'll get the ball, they'll get it, and then they'll go wham. And they'll work really hard on the explosive part where they are throwing it. And then like, they'll catch it, wham. And they do like slow all the way through here. And that's not what this tempo indicates. Remember, this tempo is eccentric first, isometric second, concentric third, right? And it's all about like, this says X in all three. So I shouldn't be just throwing hard. I should be catching, not pausing, and then throwing hard, right? So what I should do is I should have the medicine ball, I should throw it, and then when I get it back, like that, right? That's explosive in all three types of muscular contractions, right? It's explosive concentrically, eccentrically, and isometrically. In fact, it's not isometric, it's amortization, right? So that's important. Whenever you see that tempo, it's fast in all three directions. And then 0 to 60 seconds rest. Balance power are, like I said, 2-3 sets, 8 to 12 reps. Our tempo is controlled. We're back to that 3 to 5 second hold on landing that we saw up here in plyometric stabilization. But remember, this was a plyometric exercise, which was all about learning how to jump. This is a balance exercise. The assumption is that your client already knows how to jump, and they've already developed a goodly amount of balance from these other two levels. So now you are working on the maximum, most intense type of balance, which is jumping and landing on one leg. So even though it has the same tempo as our plyometric stabilization exercises, balance power exercises are totally different. It's just that plyometric stabilization is jumping on two legs and landing on two legs. Balance power is jumping on one leg and landing on one leg. So you're going to hold that landing for 3 to 5 seconds. That's your tempo. And our focus here is balance, whereas our focus here was, reactivity. Then we've got plyometric power, which is like power with more power, right? That's going to be 2 to 3 sets, 8 to 12 reps, XXX tempo for sure, and 0 to 60 seconds rest. So that's all about being as explosive as possible. Things like ice skaters, proprioceptive plyometrics, stuff like that. Any questions on movement prep? Questions, comments, concerns? Charlie, how's my pace?
Oh, you're good. I was just gonna ask Brad. So you have to go through, I was gonna say, how could I word it? Before I actually get to the resistance part of the workout, or I have to go through all these, right?
Kind of. So I want to show you. Let me pull up max strength here real quick, or power, actually, for that matter. Let's see here. NASM max strength. So if you look on page, what was it? It's 379 for stabilization, I want to say, 381 for strength endurance. Look on page 385. Is that right? I literally have the book right here. What am I doing? Chapter 14. Oh, so close. No, 379 is the last page. The first page is 370. Yeah, 370. Okay, so 370, 372, 374, 376. So look on page 376. You will see the max strength table. And it'll look like this. So you'll see these little asterisks at the bottom. Oh my God, are you kidding me? No, hold on. I gotta find a high enough quality one. Oh, you're doing me dirty, internet. Well, I can pull up the power one. Yeah, okay, it's on the power one as well. Power, it just is worded slightly different. Is it on hypertrophy? Oh, you know what? It is on hypertrophy. So there are two little asterisks on this chart at the bottom of the page. You'll notice one of them is up on the flexibility section. See how there's a little asterisk here? So remember earlier I said your client's in strength, you should be doing active stretches, right? They're in strength. You don't want to reduce their strength. Static stretches, that autogenic inhibition, it leaves our muscles groggy. You don't want that for a client who's trying to lift heavy. Well, when do we break that rule? Take a look here, this little asterisk. Depending on the client, static stretching may still need to be used in this phase of training. And what they mean by that is if your client is has exceptionally overactive muscles and they have poor posture, you should be doing static stretches to adjust and fix that posture, regardless of whether your client's in strength or not. Because the priority is always to make sure that someone has, the proper range of motion and moves the way they're supposed to, rather than having altered range of movement just for the sake of being able to lift 5 or 10 more pounds, So our priority is safety first. And then you'll notice another asterisk next to core, balance, and plyometric and SAQ. And it says, because the goal is muscle hypertrophy, or if it said because the goal is max strength, core, balance, and plyometric and SAQ may be optional in this phase of training, although it is recommended. They can also be trained on non-resistance training days. And that is actually how I like to have an approach. So you asked me, because I know it's been a while since I've been talking for a minute. You asked me, do you always have to do core, balance, and plyometric before getting to the resistance section? Not always. Let's say you're doing, because here's the thing, max strength workouts, that's many, many sets with lots of rest. So you often will not have time in a training session to do core training or balance stuff, right? It should always be part of a program, but you might not have time to do it in your workout. So what you do is you put it on your cardio days as the warm-up for that. So you would have them go, and before they start doing their cardio, they would do a couple core circuits and a couple balance circuits and a couple reactive circuits. Maybe some SAQ stuff before they go do their big long run. And you would put that before the cardio because you do want to get that's the higher intensity of the two. You want to get that high intensity stuff out of the way first before they go do the low intensity, which is cardio. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I understood, bro. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. So let's go ahead and move on to SAQ real quick. And by the way, that's true basically in these three phases: hypertrophy, max strength, and power. Although it can apply anywhere. There's lots of times where I'll put core stuff on opposite days. Actually, did you notice earlier I didn't have core stuff listed because I do it this week in my cardio stuff. Let's look at SAQ. So speed, agility, and quickness. These are exercises that involve limited horizontal inertia and limited unpredictability, which means we're saying, okay, so you're going to choose speed exercises, right? We don't have a lot of horizontal stuff. There's no changes in direction. And we don't have unpredictability. There's no, quickness responding stuff, right? So 1 to 2 sets, 2 to 3 reps, moderate tempo. It's move fast, but don't go crazy. 0 to 90 seconds of rest. Clients in the strength level, whether it's strength endurance, hypertrophy, or max strength, these are exercises that allow for greater horizontal inertia. So now you're starting to allow some agility, but we still limit the unpredictability. We still limit the quickness. So we're doing speed plus agility here. 3 to 4 sets, 3 to 5 reps, fast tempo, 0 to 60 seconds rest. And then Clients in the power level, maximal horizontal inertia, maximal unpredictability, right? Lots of speed, lots of agility, lots of quickness. So now they have to respond to some type of external stimulus. You know, we went from a moderate tempo to a fast tempo. Now we are at an explosive, as fast as you can do it tempo. You know, this is your max. So again, you're trying to get your athlete to peak here. I just realized it's the wrong color. Sorry, that's going to drive me just a little crazy. 1 second here. These are colors swapped. It should be that. And you should be that. And now I'm happy. Okay. So that's, oh God, I have it over here too. That's what we're looking at in SAQ. Now, until now, we have been talking about just stabilization versus strength versus power. We really haven't broken things down by phase. And this is where it sometimes gets a little confusing. But our first phase is the stabilization phase, right? So this is where you are going to choose resistance stabilization exercises, right? So your exercise selection is always going to be resistance stabilization. You're going to choose 1 to 3 sets. Your repetitions are 12 to 20. So you'll notice like low number of sets, high number of reps. And our tempo is going to be a 4-2-1 tempo because you're choosing resistance stabilization exercises, which means those exercises should be pretty unstable. They should be fairly wobbly, you know, doing a chest press on a stability ball, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, that's the eccentric portion. You're going to hold it 1, 2, and then you're going to press for 1, right? Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, right? It's 4 seconds eccentric, 2 seconds isometric, 1 second concentric, right? So that is our resistance tempo there for stabilization clients. And you'll notice until now, we haven't had to talk about intensity. Well, you're going to lift it 50 to 70% of your 1 rep max. So, you know, you're lifting at a relatively low intensity, which makes a lot of sense considering you're doing such a high number of repetitions. And these are backwards too. You know, it's 12 to 20 reps. 12 reps corresponds with around 70%. 20 reps corresponds with around 50%. It'll never be perfect, just so you guys know. I mean, people are just going to burn a lot, and then they'll get complaining and be like, I can't, you know. But it's a good starting point. And then 0 to 90 seconds of rest. You'll notice the rest period here is actually relatively long. You know, earlier I mentioned rest periods are going to be short if you're doing, you know, high reps. The only reason we have that 90 seconds built in there is just in case it's a real newbie client who just needs a lot of rest. You know, they're brand new and they're really riding the struggle bus. So that's sometimes that seems a little confusing. If you can keep your rest period from 30 to 60 seconds, that's pretty ideal. Then this is where we got to get into the phases. So I've got the exercise selection here in green if it's a strength movement, and in blue if it's a stabilization movement. So, so Charlie, this is the first of 2 weird phases. So strength endurance, like I said earlier, I kind of mentioned how it's like kind of like phase 1.5 more than it is like a true phase 2, because you're kind of easing out of the concept of stabilization. You're kind of easing into strength. So you're not just going to go straight do a strength movement. You're actually going to have to do superset movements in this level of training according to NASM. And what they're going to do is your first movement's going to be a strength exercise, and your second movement is going to be a stabilization exercise. So exercise selection here, you're going to superset strength with stabilization for the same body part in what NASM likes to say as biomechanically similar movements. So I would do maybe a bench press, which is a chest strength exercise, and I would pair it with a stability ball chest press, which is a chest stabilization exercise. Or I would do a barbell squat, which is a chest leg exercise, and I would pair that with a single, well, actually probably not single leg, like a Bosu ball kettlebell squat, which would be like a stabilization exercise. And I would take no rest in between movement A and movement B. So remember, we talked about supersets on Friday, right? A superset is just 2 exercises back to back, but a NASM strength endurance superset is 2 exercises back to back with no for the same body part, blah, stabilization. Oh my God, strength first, stabilization second. Let me start that over. I realized there was more to the first definition like halfway through that, and I goofed myself up. A superset is 2 exercises back to back with no rest in between. A strength endurance superset is 2 exercises back to back with no rest in between, strength first, stabilization second for the same body part. There we go. So that would look something, well, I'll show you in a little bit. But that is how we do that. And so when I say that it's 2 to 4 sets, I mean it's 2 to 4 sets for the superset. So, 2 of each, 4 of each. 8 to 12 repetitions each. So 8 for the first exercise and 8 for the second, which really means, by the way, that you're actually doing 16 to 24 reps. That's why it's the endurance phase. 24 reps is a lot of freaking reps. So you're working really, really hard here. The tempo for your strength movement is 2-0-2. So that's 1-2-1-2, right? So it'd be like 1-2-1-2, like 1-2-1-2. That's your strength movement. But then your stabilization movement, just like in the stabilization phase, 1-1-2, 1-2-3-4. 1-1-2, 1-2-3-4, right? Intensity is 70 to 80% of your 1 rep max. That is for the strength movement, by the way. Your stabilization movement is still 50 to 70. And then 0 to 60 seconds rest after your stabilization movement. So once the superset's over, it's 0 to 60 seconds rest. So that's kind of a unique phase, and that's why that one's like a little bit wonky. Do you have any questions about that, Charlie? Is that or anybody else? Anybody confused on strength endurance? Cool. All right, hypertrophy is the easiest, in my opinion. Hypertrophy is the simplest phase on the whole OPT model, but this is your gains, right? This is the bodybuilding phase. If you're really trying to like pack on muscle, this is where you want to go. You're going to only choose resistance strength movements. There's no superset nonsense here, although you can do supersets. It's just not required. 3 to 5 sets. Notice how we went from 1 to 3 to 2 to 4. Now we're all the way up to 3 to 5, right? So our sets are going up as we climb on intensity. And guess what? Our reps are going to go down. We were at 8 to 12. Now we're all the way down to 6 to 12. So now hypertrophy, the intensity is, it's getting a little bit higher. 2-0-2 tempo, so it's a medium tempo the whole time. 75 to 85% of your 1 rep max. So 70 to 80 before, because it was 6 to 12. I'm sorry, 70 to 80 before because it was 8 to 12. Now it's 6 to 12, which is 75 up to 85. And it's just 0 to 60 seconds rest. This is, like I said, this is the classic stuff you'll find in most online workouts, 4 sets 8, 4 sets of 10, whatever. The max strength level is the true strength stuff, right? So this is going to be where you're looking at 4 to 6 sets, right? Sorry, I'm changing this right now. It's going to drive me crazy. So you're looking at 4 to 6 sets here. So that's the highest number of sets that we're going to see. On the whole OPT model, max strength has more training volume than any other like phase of training. So this is really where we're seeing the most volume here. So 4 to 6 sets, but look at how low our rep scheme is, all the way down to 1 to 5 sets. I personally really like 5 sets of 5. I think it works really well. I also don't hate six sets of 4. That's another really good routine. If you're really trying to like amp up your maximum strength side of things. Your tempo is going to be super explosive. That's XXX. However, anybody in here who's ever done heavy lifting knows that it doesn't actually look that explosive. You know, it's often really fast, and then you're just trying to drive as hard as you can, but you're trying to move fast. You're trying to be explosive. 85 to 100% of your 1 rep max. 100 obviously corresponds with, you know, 1, and 85 corresponds pretty well with 5 reps here. If you're really great at glycolysis, you might be able to get 6 reps out of it, but that's about where we're putting our intensity. And then until now, we've only taken, you know, up to 90 seconds of rest. But here, whew, look at this, 3 to 5 minutes of rest, which is ironic because it's like, man, I'm getting the most rest when I'm doing the least reps. Yeah, that's how intense this is. It is really meant to be super, super, super intense, you know? So that is our max strength phase in a nutshell. You guys have any questions on strength? Any questions on strength endurance, hypertrophy, max strength, any of those? All righty. So last one we've got is power. And power is going to look really similar to strength endurance. This is also doing the superset thing. So you remember how earlier I mentioned that not earlier today, but earlier in class, we mentioned that power is a formula. It's force multiplied by velocity, right? Well, in the power phase, we want to address both sides of that equation. We want to address the force and the velocity. And so when we're looking at this, what you're going to do is you're going to do a resistance strength movement. That's going to be your first movement. That's your high force exercise. And you're going to pair that with a resistance power movement. That's your high velocity exercise. So just like before in strength endurance, we're supersetting 2 exercises back to back. But in the strength endurance level, it was strength plus stabilization. In the power level, it's strength plus power. So what you're going to do is you would do, if it was a strength endurance superset, you do a bench press paired with a stability ball chest press, right? But in the power level, you're going to do the bench press and you're going to pair it with a medicine ball chest pass, right? Something super fast and super explosive. So 3 to 5 sets for both, obviously, because sets are not per exercise. You're gonna do 1 to 5 reps for the strength movement. That looks identical to what we saw up here. So that, you know, no big surprise there. Again, this is all about high force, right? And then we got the high velocity side of things here. You're gonna do 8 to 10 reps for your power movement. Both of those are gonna be super explosive at an XXX tempo. And then your intensity. And the intensity, this is the most complicated part of the whole big chart. But it's 85 to 100% of your 1 rep max for your strength movement. That is, again, totally identical, 85 to 100 because it's 1 to 5 reps, right? So those are the same numbers we saw here. For your power movement, there are 2 ways to choose your intensity. It is either up to 10% of your body weight. So if you weigh 180 pounds, you could do 18 pounds or less, or it's down to 30 to 45% of your 1 rep max. So in an ideal world, NASM wants you to choose, you know, a strength movement and pair it with a power movement, which would mean, you know, bench press 1 to 5 reps, medicine ball chest pass 8 to 10 reps. But there are other certifications out there that's where this 30 to 45% number comes from. And they're a fan of doing like a heavy bench press at 85 to 100% of your 1 rep max. And then they don't break down the idea of like power exercise. They're just like, just do the bench press again, but do it explosively and for a light weight. So you would then let's say like, I want to keep the math really simple. So let's say my bench press, 1 rep max is 100 pounds. So I'm going to lift at 85% of that. I'm going to do 5 reps. I would lift 85 pounds for 5 reps. Then I would strip a bunch of that weight off the bar, and I would do somewhere between 30 to 45% of my 1 rep max for 8 to 10 reps. So I would do an additional 8 reps with just the 45-pound bar, but I would do it at the friggin' speed of light. And that is how I would apply that. That's why this is so complicated, because NASM has to put these physiologically researched numbers. But you're not going to do, like, there is, you know, it's not like you're going to grab a medicine ball and be like, what's my 1 rep max on a medicine ball chest pass? So that's where the 8 to 10% comes in. Or a squat jump, right? You're going to wear a weight vest doing a box jump up to 10% of your body weight. Then our rest period, if you are doing just straight supersets, it's 1 to 2 minutes between pairs. Or a lot of times people will do this as a big complicated circuit. This is actually my favorite method. And that is where you do 3 to 5 minutes between leg circuits. So you do strength, power, strength, power, strength, power. Take a big long rest, reset the whole thing. Any questions on that one? Because that's probably the most complicated one. The intensity there part is real wonky. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. Real wonky. Questions? You guys good? Nobody? All right. So last thing I want to do tonight, I want to show you what this looks like in real time. So we've been working on Bob's workout, right? It was Bob, right? Oh, we didn't give him a name. All right. So here's our example workout we've been building. Until now, we've had a stabilization. We've had phase 1, 4, phase 1, 2, 3, or 4, and then we skip straight to phase 5. We've done our movement prep. We've done our warm up, right? Well, now we got to kind of make this sort of a 5-month situation here, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to add our resistance section. Fair warning, some of these workouts probably, if you were to do them in real life, would be way too long. But, you know, they're prime examples of exercise selection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick, this is a stabilization client. They're in phase 1. So I'm going to pick like a total body stabilization. Actually, I'm just going to go with a chest, back, shoulders, biceps, triceps, and legs. We're going to keep it simple. We're going to pick 6 exercises. So let's go with a medicine ball push-up. That's a really fun, you know, one hand on a ball, right? Let's go with a stability ball bent, stability ball row, right? So that's a chest supported like row on the stability ball. Let's go with a single leg dumbbell shoulder press. That would be a good stabilization level shoulder exercise. Single leg biceps curl, single leg triceps extension, right? That'd be on like a cable machine. And then let's go with like a Bosu ball squat, right? We need to pick, if we look at our big chart, we need to pick between 1 to 3 sets, 12 to 20 reps, a 4-2-1 tempo, and 0 to 90 seconds of rest. So let's keep this simple here. We'll do straight sets. So we'll tell our client that this is horizontal loading, right? So we're just going to do straight sets. 3 sets of everything, 15 reps of everything, 4-2-1 tempo every time. And 60 seconds rest. Cool. Really, really, really simple, right? Couldn't be a simpler workout. Then we got to get into just month 2, which is now going to be strength endurance. So we're going to have to make some modifications here. Right? So this is going to be phase 2 now, right? February 1st. This is an example, strength endurance rather than just stabilization by itself. So now we got to do that superset stuff. So I need to put an exercise between every one of these. Now I'm going to keep it really simple. I'm going to remove the biceps and the triceps here. Just not that I can't do them. It's just that this workout would be massive. There wouldn't be enough time to ever do it in the whole world, right? So I'm going to remove that, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut these down here for now. So our medicine ball push-up is the stabilization exercise, which means that it's supposed to be exercise B. It's the second one. The first one needs to be a strength movement. So let's do a dumbbell chest press, right? So we do a dumbbell chest press, then we do a medicine ball push-up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave a blank space here, and that's going to indicate that it's a superset. And then I've got my stability ball row. That's my stabilization exercise. Let's do a bent over dumbbell row, right? So there's my strength movement paired with my stabilization movement, right? Again, superset. And then my single leg dumbbell shoulder press. Let's pair that with a seated dumbbell shoulder press. Right? So strength, because it's seated, I'm very stable. Stabilization, because it's very unstable. And then lastly, barbell squat. King of leg exercises, right? Now, on my training volume, I need to be between 2 and 4 sets, 8 to 12 reps. Well, I was doing 3 sets of 15 before. Let's keep it at 3 sets. But 15 reps is too high. Let's take it down to 10. 10 for both, which really means 20, right? And then my tempo is 2-0-2 for my strength movement and 4-2-1 for my stabilization, so nothing's changed there. 0 seconds of rest after my strength movement, 60 seconds of rest after my stabilization movement, and they're all supersets. So I really like doing this. You don't have to put these spaces here. You could just do this, and that indicates the same thing. I just think it's much more clear to do it this way. But you will notice I'm having trouble fitting it all on one page. So that's the rub there. How do I make enough space for this? Oh, I have just enough. Never mind.
I got a question, Brad.
Yeah, what's up?
When doing the superset, do you want to keep the Q variables when you're doing the stability exercise? Do you want to still keep those stability variables, or
the tempo? Yes, and the exercise selection, yes, but repetitions are between 8 and 10 for both.
When it comes to
8 to 12 for both.
When it comes to stability, right?
Yeah, even the stability exercise, it's the same for both. It's 8 to 12 reps each. Yeah, that's the one thing. Like the power one, it changes, but that's only because you can't get enough, like, work out of 5 reps for power movements. But yeah, the reps don't correspond 12 to 20. Don't do 8 strength, chest somethings, and then 20 stabilization. That's not going to apply it right.
So could you just keep them both at 12 then? Because it looks like 12 is the number, not 10. But I don't know though.
Oh, no. It's 8 to 12. Yeah, I could pick 8. I could make 8 for each of these. It's a range of 8 to 12. Or I could pick 12. Both are, it's a range, both are acceptable. The reason I chose 10 No, the reason I chose 10 is because I went from 15 reps, and this is really taking it up to 20 reps. And then I'm going to drop the reps down massively when we get to hypertrophy.
So you would keep the rep range of strength endurance, basically.
Always. Yes, always. That's what I mean when I say like it's 8 to 12 for both movements, which really means a total of 20. In this example, or it's a total of 8. It's 8 to 12, so it's a total of 16 to 24. Have you guys ever done drop sets before? Anybody ever done drop sets in the gym?
Yeah.
So this will feel like drop sets. Like it may be doing 2 exercises that are different from each other, but you know how drop sets burn like crazy, right? That's what this is going to feel like when you try this out. All right, let's do month 3 now, which means I'm actually going to just copy all this. So, copy, and then paste it there. All right, month 3 is now phase 3. So we got to do March. And this is an example hypertrophy, right? Example hypertrophy routine. So we get to do the same warm up. We get to do the same movement prep. For the record, guys, I want to be really clear. I would totally change all this because I don't want my client doing the exact same thing for friggin' 3 months in a row. But I also really like to teach this example and always keep them the same because it kind of highlights the fact that's like, oh, that's still eligible. And it's showing you that, you know, they would be the same. But in the real world, I would never do it this way. And this is going to be the simplest workout you've ever seen. We're going to do a chest exercise, back, biceps, triceps, legs, and shoulders. So let's start with the chest. Let's do that dumbbell chest press like we did. We did that dumbbell, what was it, bent over row, right? Which is not how I called it, bent over dumbbell row. Seated shoulder press. Let's go with seated preacher curl, which is the only way to do a preacher curl, so it's just preacher curl. Let's do a skull crusher. I get NASM speak. Supine, dumbbell, triceps, extension, and then legs, barbell squat. Cool. Again, we're going to go back to horizontal loading. And now I'm in resistance. I need 3 to 5 sets of 6 to 12 reps. Let's drop it down. Let's do 4 sets, 8 reps of everything. Tempo 202. 60 seconds rest. Earlier I said stabilization couldn't be simpler. I was wrong. Hypertrophy couldn't be simpler. That is the most basic workout ever written. But you know what? It would work. Doesn't have to be fancy. It really, really doesn't. And moving on to max strength. Let's take a look at month 4 here. Oh, whoops. I forgot. I don't have this copied anymore. So month 4, we are into April. That's phase 4. Our goal is now max strength. Again, it's all strength, so I don't need to change the warm-up. I don't need to change the movement prep. I don't need to change the SIQ. I don't even need to change my exercise selection. I can literally leave all of this the same because these are all strength movements. And I never would, but I'm gonna tonight because my goal is to give you a very clear example. We're gonna change the sets though, right? I went from 3 to 5 sets to, I was like, where the hell? Oh, that's right, it's doing this thing. I went from 3 to 5 sets to 4 to 6 sets. I went from 6 to 12 reps to 1 to 5. So you know what? We're gonna do a classic. We're gonna do the strong lifts 5 by 5. 5 sets, 5 reps. But now my tempo needs to be explosive. And my rest needs to be long. 3 friggin' minutes of rest. Now, I want to show you something. That is 5 sets of 3 minutes. That is 15, 30, 45, 60, 75, 90 minutes, plus a warm-up, plus a movement prep, plus SAQ. You will probably not be able to get through. And that is only resting. That is not even counting the actual lifting part. So will you have time to do things like this? Probably freaking not. That is why we often move this stuff over to another day. That is also why we often have things like a bro split where we start breaking things down per body part. But the nice thing is you're getting 5 sets per body part out of the way in one movement. So, you know, if I were to do like 2 chest exercises on Monday as like a heavy chest day, that's 10 sets per body part per week. That bro split is suddenly looking pretty appealing. Maybe I do 3 exercises, right? 3 chest exercises on Monday, 3 upper back exercises on Tuesday, 3 chest shoulder exercises on Wednesday, probably 4 on Friday for the legs. And then this has arms. Don't do arms max strength. Oh, I love this. Look at this. There's the bro split. This is a big guy with no legs. All right. Sorry. Justin Bieber versus Batman. Okay, I'm done. I love the internet sometimes so much. All right, so that is that's phase 4. Again, horizontal loading is going to work really well here. And then lastly, we got power. So now this is no longer month 3. This is month 5. This is no longer March. This is now May. And our goal is still power. So now we finally changed up our stretches. We finally changed up our movement prep, our SAQ. But we are actually going to steal some of those same movements from strength again. Because again, they are still strength movements that are eligible for that superset. Because I got to start with the strength movement and then introduce a power. But I do not do biceps or triceps. I don't do single joint movements in power. So I'm killing the preacher curl and the tricep extension. We're going to get rid of those. And we're going to add in some power movements. So dumbbell chest press first, medicine ball rotation, chest pass second. I know. Earlier, I said that was a core exercise. It totally is. Guess what? It also counts as a chest exercise. Sorry. Sometimes they are in multiple places. Then bent over dumbbell row. We'll pair that with a medicine ball slam. So medicine ball, like slam onto the ground. That's going to be great for the upper back. Seated shoulder press into a dumbbell push press, barbell squat into a box jump. All right, superset. Superset everywhere here. Now for my sets, we're going to keep that the same. And for my reps, it'll be 5 for the strength, 10 for the power. and then XXX tempo for all. Now, there are two ways to approach rest. In this version, we are doing straight sets. So there's kind of two ways to approach this here. There's the take even more rest approach, which is taking 1 to 2 minutes between the pairs, and then 3 to 5 minutes between the circuits or the sets. Me personally, I honestly just like taking 0 seconds and then 3 minutes, like it says. So superset, 3 nub. It was in the wrong place. So we're gonna do it just like this. And that is our power routine. And then again, stack stretches, you know, just like every level. So now we've got 5 months of routine here, right? But one thing I want to do is I want to really quickly, you know, lay this out in such a way that makes sense with like an annual plan, right? So we're gonna put in search. So now we're gonna go table. Shoot. Okay. Okay. Also, this needs to be up here. Okay, so now, oh, I need one more. So now we've got our overall annual plan here. And what this is going to look like in this version. And honestly, I don't even think this is a very good way to do things because it's kind of like, you know, you're not really focused on anything, but we got phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5. And we're going to go ahead and mark it with an 2. And that's what our client's routine looks like. And that's the whole thing right there. Does that how you tracking, guys? Feel good about that, right? We went from January, February, March, April, and you can see which phases we're in. Month 1, month 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's the whole thing. Month 6, we probably reset, go all the way back through the whole thing again. I'm not a big fan of doing this. I've done this for myself. I actually do recommend you guys do this. I recommend everybody in this call right now, everybody who's going to be a trainer, everybody who's going to be an ASM trainer, I really recommend that you do one basically year of just 1 month at a time, plugging away at each of these levels and each of these phases, just so you can kind of experience them and get good at them. Goof around with those exercises in your textbook, figure out the ones that you like, you know, make this part of your routine. Doesn't mean you have to stop the goals that you're working on. You know, I'm sure everybody in here has personal fitness goals that they're aiming towards, but you're going to be super fit at the end of the year. At the end of the year, you're never going to plateau, and you're going to be a freaking expert on how to apply periodization. I really do recommend doing this. You know, I don't like max strength personally. It is my least favorite phase of the whole OPT model. I really don't like doing hypertrophy either. I don't mean that I don't like them like personally. I just mean I don't like doing them. They are not my favorite phases because it just doesn't match up with my brain sort of sees as working out. But I at least do them every year, one of them at least one for 1 month at a time, just so I can always get a little bit of practice in. So that's an example 5 months that we've been building in this class. I'm gonna go ahead and send that out to everybody today. But do you guys have any questions on any of that? You guys all feeling pretty good? Charlie, how you feeling? It was your first big chart.
It's all good, you know, but it's like a lot to take in. But you know, I'm just gonna go over the video again. You know, it's all good.
Oh yeah. Plus, you're gonna get it a bunch. Trust me. The rest of these guys can tell you. It's like, yes, we know it's big chart day. You know, by the time I'm done with you, you'll know it like the back of your hand.
Got it. All good. Thank you.
Robert, Nicholas, Irene, how you guys feeling?
Pretty good.
Cool. Robert?
Pretty good. I just have one quick question though in regards to volume, training volume.
Yeah, totally.
So so in max strength, you get more training volume out of that phase than what you do in hypertrophy, even though you do 4 sets of 5 reps in max strength, and then in hypertrophy you do.
It's kind of an interesting question. So the actual highest volume is hypertrophy, even though there are more sets in max strength. So let me pull this up for you because I'm going to do it on the calculator here. So let's take a look here, right? This is, let's see, here they are both right here, right? So that's 8 to 12, oh, that's not true. 6 to 12 reps, right? So that would be a low of 6 and a high of 12. So we had 6 plus 12, and there's 2 things, so we'll divide it by 2. So that's an average of 9, right? And it is 3 to 5 sets. So 3 plus 5, that's an average of 4. We don't need to math that out. So 4 times 9, that's an average of about 36 in terms of like our total training volume versus 4 to 6, which is an average of 5, and 1 to 5, which is an average of 3. So 5 times 3, which is actually only a total training volume of 15. So hypertrophy actually has a higher volume overall, but the other thing that NASM doesn't really break down here, I mean, it's on the table. It just isn't something that gets talked about a lot. The other part of training volume is the weight that you're lifting. So then you also have to average out this number versus this number, and how much weight someone is lifting. And that's, by the way, something that you can look for. Like one thing that sometimes like powerlifters will do, they won't just track, like what their overall like sets and reps and stuff are. They'll track how many total pounds they lifted. So they're like, I did, 800 pounds and 62 pounds today. And I did it over 3 sets versus like, I did 900 pounds. I just did it over 4 sets. They'll look at training volume that way. There's sort of 2 different ways to analyze training volume, but that is a very, very super advanced approach that really the only athletes I can think of that it really, really super applies to are professional powerlifters and like Olympic weightlifters. You will get just as far with every other type of athlete in the world and every other client in the world, just analyzing sets versus reps.
So as far as like for test prep though, when it comes to volume, we just primarily want to focus on the sets and reps only.
Yeah, sets times reps. Yeah. They won't ask you a question that way. At least I don't think so. I don't think I don't know. Maybe they'll say like, what is training volume? And you'll need to know that it is the overall amount of work performed, I think is the definition. I have the definition. Why am I guessing? I literally have it in our notes that we talked about tonight. Let me pull it up. Training volume will be defined total amount of work performed. Then they may ask it like, Yeah, it would be sets times reps. They won't ask it the way. They won't. It'll never be worded the other way that I mentioned. Irene, did you have a question? I saw your thing light up for a second.
No, you asked how we're doing. I said, I was just going to say, I'm learning.
Yeah.
I'm in the process.
Flashcard all these, by the way. Like, memorize those tables.
All right.
I will say this. Here's the thing. I will like level with you guys. This is advice outside of, in the ideal world, memorize it all. In the practical world, most of your questions will be related to the resistance section. So if you are worried about your ability to memorize something and you're like, man, I don't know if I can memorize all the core and all the movement preps and all the balances and all the flexibility. All right, cool. Do the flexibility for stabilization, strength, and power, and then do all the resistance training for all 5 phases. Prioritize those. That is the bulk of where your questions will come from. The odds of you getting how many reps are required for clients in the power phase, the likelihood of that question is actually pretty low. But the likelihood of how many reps for resistance in the power phase, the likelihood of that's pretty high. So that's my on the down low advice to you. As a teacher, I'm supposed to say, do it all. But the real version of me is like, I've seen this test. They don't usually ask you about the movement prep reps. They usually ask you about movement prep exercise selection and resistance section reps, sets and intensity and stuff. Anything else, guys?
Brad, I have a quick question related to the homework.
Sure.
With the force and the velocity.
Okay.
The question is, usually as the force demands of an activity increase, what occurs to the velocity? It decreases, but doesn't the velocity increase as the force increases? Like, I'm just picturing, for instance, cardio when you're running, when the force is increased, doesn't the velocity automatically increase as well?
I like where your head's at. I like that thinking, but surprisingly, no. You are actually hitting the ground with less force once you are at top speed, which seems crazy, but think about when you start running, how much harder you are driving against the ground versus when you're already up at speed. It's almost like you're flying. You're bouncing from step to step. There's way less force. It seems weird when you apply it to cardio, but think of it in terms of weight instead. Can you lift something super heavy fast? No way. Right? Like if I asked you to throw a bowling ball as fast as you can, and that bowling ball weighs 25 pounds, versus I want you to throw this ball of paper as fast as you can, the ball of paper is going to lose velocity really fast, but initially when it's flying out of your hand, it's super speedy, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Or even actually a better version, badminton?
Yeah.
Right? Those things literally move I think 120 miles an hour at top speed.
Dang.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's also because they're super aerodynamic as well. Fastest.
But it makes sense with the weight put on it. Okay, I get it.
Hold on a second. Wow. Okay. The fastest recorded badminton smash ever in the Guinness World Records traveled 259 miles per hour.
What?
That is insane.
Oh my God.
Guarantee you no bowler has ever thrown a bowling ball 259 miles. So,
alrighty.
So yeah, they're backwards.
Okay, cool.
That was a good one. Any other questions? That was a fun one. No. All right, guys. Well, hope you all had a great weekend. Hope you all had a great night. I will get this video uploaded and see you guys in the morning.
Awesome.
All right, see you guys.
See you tomorrow.
See you guys.